the balcony by the police. The evidence establishes that this did not occur.
I can say on behalf of the family that the system and the process need to change.
Nearly 3 months since Regis Korchinski-Paquette fell to her death from an apartment balcony, the SIU has cleared the 7 police officers who were on the scene when it happened. Korchinski-Paquette's death led to thousands taking to the streets of Toronto. They called for justice and answers into how the 29-year-old Black and Indigenous woman ended up dead after her mother called police. Today, the province's police watchdog released its report into what happened. Angelina King joins us live from outside the apartment building in Hyde Park, where the family's lawyer addressed the media just a short time ago. First, Angelina, tell us more about the report.
Sure, so it was very thorough and walked us through step by step what the SIU says happened. Now, you might remember right after Regis Korchinski-Paquette died, the family suggested police might have thrown her off the balcony. Today, the SIU report says that she was alone on the balcony trying to make her way to the neighboring balcony when she lost her balance and fell. So the SIU had to consider whether there was any criminal liability on behalf of the officers that were at the apartment that evening, looking into 2 things. 1, whether their actions went too far, and 2, did their actions go far enough in trying to help prevent her death. Now, the SIU has said that all officers acted lawfully, so no criminal charges will be laid and their investigation is complete. But today we spoke with the family and their legal team. They say that they strongly disagree. They're disappointed and have launched an investigation of their own.
This is a very sad day for our family, for Regis too. I'm very concerned about the SIU's decision, and the public should be concerned as well.
A family forever coming to terms with the loss and getting no comfort from the SIU's report.
Justice wasn't served today, but that doesn't mean we're not going to stop fighting for my sister.
A large group gathering outside the apartment today as the family's legal team told reporters police had a duty to care for Regis Korchinski-Paquette, and they failed.
The independent family investigation had uncovered there was clearly a strong foundation for criminal liability on the part of at least one of the officers who was in that apartment when Regis fell to her death.
On May 27th, the SIU says Korchinski-Paquette's mother called police to the apartment reporting a fight between her daughter and son. She wanted Korchinski-Paquette to get mental health help. She experienced a seizure earlier that day. The family met police in the hallway, and Korchinski-Paquette asked to go back inside to use the washroom. Police followed. Within minutes, she toppled over an AC unit and went onto the balcony. The report says when an officer tried to open the balcony door, she kept it closed and began climbing the railing.
The evidence indicates that no one other than Miss Korchinski-Paquette was on the balcony when she scaled over the railing and attempted to sidestep along the outer ledge over to her neighbor's balcony, lost her balance, and fell.
The SIU says a civilian saw the whole thing happen from the ground below. 2 officers and a paramedic reported the same thing. Korchinski-Paquette was on the phone with her dad seconds before she died. Witnesses reported hearing her call out for help. And today, Toronto police saying it'll conduct a standard review and that no one is at fault.
It's just a tragic set of circumstances that we must endeavor to try to prevent again by learning from it.
Korchinski-Paquette's death led to public outrage and questions about exactly what happened in that apartment on that balcony and whether race and mental illness played a factor. Vigils and marches were held in her honor while protesting the larger issue of police brutality. Korchinski-Paquette died just 2 days after the police killing of George Floyd.
I accept that systemic racism exists and continues to challenge the relationship between racialized communities and the institutions of our justice system.
The SIU director says while there was no overt evidence of racism in this case, he says questions of race did exist. He points to one finding of evidence that Korchinski-Paquette told officers that her father was on his way to the apartment and that he is white, although officers say that they didn't hear her say that. Now, Korchinski-Paquette is being remembered as a woman who was active in her church. She was a talented gymnast, always showing love to her family. She liked to sing and to dance, and those close to her say that they'll always remember her heart of gold and a smile that lit up the room. Dwight?
It is a tragedy. Thank you. The federal government will pump up to $2 billion into provincial education systems across the country. It's to help make schools safer as classes resume amid the COVID-19 pandemic. Our Queen's Park reporter Mike Crawley is live outside a school in the West End for us right now. And Mike, Ontario gets to decide how it will spend its share of this cash.
Yeah, and that is roughly $750 million over the coming year, Dwight. There are no strings attached so long as it goes towards reducing the risk from coronavirus in the schools. In a Toronto playground, a masked-up prime minister chats with a mom about the return to school before heading to a school gym for his announcement.
Parents and staff are anxious about what the school year may hold. As a dad and as a former teacher, I get that.
$2 billion for public education, unprecedented for a Canadian federal government since the provinces have sole power over schools.
We've made this funding flexible, so provinces and ultimately schools can use it for what they need most.
Ontario gets roughly $760 million from the fund. Half of that comes this fall.
This is more funding on top of Ontario's already leading investment in the country, and we think it's going to make a difference.
The province says it will spend much of the cash on school safety, including hiring additional teachers and custodians and improving school ventilation. $70 million goes to making school buses less crowded. They're spending on remote learning, special education, mental health, and nurses, and $50 million set aside for unanticipated needs.
When I met the Prime Minister on Friday, he asked me, about the going back to school plan, and I explained it to him, and I said, we're all in this together. We need all levels of support.
The federal government has a role to play to help provinces financially and to push for those changes to make sure schools are safe.
So will this injection of federal cash reduce the risks from COVID-19?
I think it's a lot of money. I think that we should see the province putting that money towards what we know will make schools safer for kids.
For parents like Rachel Huot with kids in the Toronto District School Board, it's now decision time. An email today from the board asks parents whether they'll send their kids into class next month.
That email is really, it's sort of hitting us in the gut. We're really not sure what to do.
So Mike, I know you were trying to get to that. What impact do you think this money will have when it trickles down to the level of the boards like the TDSB?
Yeah, well, Dwight, boards are going to get some leeway from the province in exactly how they spend the money. So it's going to take a while before all of that really shakes down. Now, clearly, it does have the potential to reduce class sizes at some schools, and that has been a key issue that parents have been concerned about, but not necessarily across the board. Really, whether it's going to actually be enough to truly reduce the risk of COVID-19 spreading in schools, we're only really going to know that once classes are back in session.
Thank you, Mike. Now, one of the biggest questions about back to school, what happens if a student tests positive for COVID-19? Today, the province released its plan for how it will respond to a potential outbreak. Lorena Redekop has more on what you can expect.
A school will let parents know if there's a positive case at their child's school, similar to when there's a lice outbreak. And the government says contact tracing will start as soon as a case is identified.
We will not put your child or our staff at risk. Folks, we have pulled out all the stops for the 2 million students in our province.
Here's an example of the guidance from the province. If a child or teacher tests positive, they should stay away and isolate for 14 days. Cohorts considered at high risk, such as a classroom, will also be isolated. Students can still learn online if they're well enough. If a parent tests positive, it's strongly recommended, but not required, that they tell the school. Their children should stay home and isolate for 14 days. Public Health will advise a school what else to do. If a child becomes ill at school, they'll be put in a separate room. Staff helping will wear PPE, and a parent will be called to pick up the child. Getting a COVID-19 test will be recommended, but not required.
It may be an ear infection. They may have a history of that. So we want to be sensitive to the fact that children don't always get sick from COVID in that. The other factor is we want to be cognizant of what's going on in the community. If there's no COVID circulating in the community, that's not always your first go-to diagnosis.
The province's chief coroner, Dr. Dirk Heyer, is now in charge of all the province's outbreaks, including at schools. A school outbreak is defined as at least 2 cases that have a link, and at least one of the people could have become infected at school. An entire school would be dismissed if it appears there's widespread transmission. This education advocate feels one change could keep cases from happening in the first place.
We still haven't really addressed the other health and safety issue, which is, I think, maybe even bigger in parents' minds, which is, don't we need to have much smaller classes so that people can be more physically distanced?
Another change we learned about today, schools will have cloth masks that'll be available for all students. Loretta Redicomp, CBC News, Toronto.
We are looking for parents, teachers, and students who can help us cover issues surrounding back to school this September. We have a forum on our website, cbc.ca/Toronto, where you can share your concerns, tell us about school conditions, and how classes are going. We'll monitor the responses, follow up where we can, and take the issues you raise right to the people in power. The unrest in Kenosha, Wisconsin turns deadly. A white teenager is under arrest after shooting and killing 2 protesters. The latest on that and more on a potential boycott from the Toronto Raptors coming up in about 5 minutes. This is a live shot of Galveston, Texas, where they are bracing tonight for Hurricane Laura. You can see water already covering the sand in some spots. Parts of Texas, along with neighboring Louisiana, facing what is described as an unsurvivable storm surge from Laura. Forecasters say some areas could face water 20 feet high, and that flooding will push up to 50 kilometers inland. Fearing what is on the way, Louisiana's governor is warning residents of catastrophic destruction from Laura. The governor saying today the state hasn't seen a storm surge like this in many, many decades. NBC's Chris Poulon is in Lafayette, Louisiana for us tonight. And Chris, the storm is now a Category 4. Conditions are already deteriorating across parts of Louisiana and Texas, and landfall is still hours away.
Yeah, that's right, Dwight, and we've seen it here ourselves. We're a bit inland here at Lafayette, and over the last couple of hours, I've seen the wind start to kick up to higher gusts. We've had some rain coming through as those outer bands of Laura approach the coast of Louisiana and Texas. Been watching the water here behind me. This is the Vermilion River, and this has been rising steadily over the last few hours. As a matter of fact, locals around here say that if you see the river actually reverse course and start going back down towards the east to head to higher ground, because that means that flooding is imminent.
Authorities are using some very dramatic language, saying the storm surge from Laura will be unsurvivable in some areas. Are people heeding the calls to get out of its path, Chris?
For the most part, yes. There are parishes in Louisiana and counties down in Texas that are under mandatory evacuation orders. In those situations, those folks know that they generally have to get out, and most do. There are always some stragglers who say, I rode out Hurricane Rita or whatever at some point and I'm staying, and first responders, mayors, governors say, hey, look, if you stay, that's fine. But if you call emergency services for a rescue, we can't promise that anybody's going to come. So you're taking your life into your own hands. And people understand that. But for the most part, the places that need to be evacuated have been evacuated, and most people have left.
Yeah, because you're putting some of that emergency personnel in even more danger if you don't leave it. It's not just cities and towns, Chris, near the coast that are watching this storm closely. It's expected to pack a punch long after it makes landfall.
Yeah, that's right. The initial problem when it comes on shore, of course, will be wind. That's expected to be later tonight at the Louisiana-Texas border at that eye wall. Really, really strong winds going on. But also, this is going to be packing a lot of rain with it. just buckets and buckets of rain. And forecasters are warning people, hey, if you think this is just a Texas and Louisiana thing, you're mistaken, because once Laura moves inland, it could actually bring widespread flash flooding and power outages to several states, including Arkansas, Mississippi, Tennessee, and Kentucky. This storm will continue on for some ways. It will even, according to forecasters, once it comes on land, remain at least a Category 1 hurricane for quite a ways inland before finally dissipating into a tropical storm and then moving into the midsection of the country.
NBC's Chris Poulon reporting from Lafayette, Louisiana for us tonight. Stay safe down there, Chris.
Thanks, Dwight.
Nick Sankovich joins us now. Nick, the big fear here is that this one will rival Katrina.
Yeah, no kidding. And what a lot of people forget is it's not just the winds with these hurricanes, but it's the storm surge that actually does the most damage. And we were talking about the storm surge, or you were talking about the storm surge earlier on, and that's really where the big concern comes. And then once this moves inland, you're talking about the heavy rainfall. Now, I was just looking at the latest forecast models here for this storm, and some areas could see as much as 200-300 millimeters of rain. And like you heard, this is going to extend all the way up into Arkansas as well, and then kind of veer eastward as it gets picked up into the what is basically the mid-latitude jet. So with that being said, you've got multiple fronts here that are going to be affecting areas to the south. Now, the one thing I will say for the weather here is that because of the jet stream over top of us, it actually won't really affect us. We may see a bit of moisture from this, but the bulk of it is going to stay to the south of us. We do have some rain to talk about, though. That is also going to come with some warmer temperatures. It's along a warm front. 20 degrees right now, humidex of 24. We are watching this. This is rainfall for us along a warm front with warm air starting to push in across the region. There is the potential for heavy rain for us tonight in some areas, and I'm going to get to that in your long-range forecast. For now, though, there's a look at the next 24 hours, up to 29 degrees tomorrow. Pretty unsettled for tonight. We'll time it out for you coming up in just a bit, Dwight.
Thank you, Nick.
You bet.
The weather is brought to you by Trane, the most reliable heating and cooling brand. We test, so it runs. It's hard to stop a train.
A teenage boy has been arrested and charged with the murders of 2 people in Kenosha, Wisconsin. A third person was wounded last night when a gunman opened fire on a crowd during protests sparked by the police shooting of a black man over the weekend. It was the third straight night of unrest, and U.S. President Donald Trump today announced he is sending in the National Guard to Kenosha. Kate Fisher has more.
More gunfire in this Wisconsin city and more death. The chaos captured on a cell phone. An apparent standoff between protesters and armed men outside a gas station turns deadly as a young white man opens fire in the middle of a street with a semi-automatic rifle. 2 people are dead and a third wounded.
For the most part, people were just kind of walking past each other, commingling without issue, despite, all these open weapons. But at a certain point, something turned. I don't know what the precise altercation was, but fights started breaking out, and before we knew it, there were shots being fired.
The 17-year-old suspect was arrested on Wednesday morning and charged with first-degree intentional homicide in the neighboring state of Illinois. He's awaiting an extradition hearing to transfer custody to Wisconsin. Police are investigating whether it was a vigilante attack.
A 26-year-old Silver Lake resident and a 36-year-old Kenosha resident lost their lives to this senseless violence. We have a person in custody out of state. I'll be working to bring that person to Wisconsin to face appropriate charges.
The city's been beset by violence, looting and fires since Sunday, when 29-year-old Jacob Blake was shot several times in the back by police as he stepped into a car with his children inside. His family says he's paralyzed and still in a critical condition.
So many people have reached out to me telling me they're sorry that this happened to my family. Well, don't be sorry, because this has been happening to my family for a long time. I'm not sad. I don't want your pity. I want change.
That's what those protesting peacefully are calling for too. But while there continues to be violence, Wisconsin's governor says the National Guard will be deployed. There are already more than 100 troops in the city, with more arriving in anticipation of continuing protests tonight. Kate Fisher, CBC News, Washington.
Talk of a boycott inside the NBA bubble turned into action today. The Milwaukee Bucks did not play their playoff game against the Orlando Magic this afternoon, sitting out in protest against what's happening in their home state. As Marivelle Tarouk shows us, it is a decision the Toronto Raptors are mulling over ahead of their game tomorrow.
We are being told now here that the Bucks have boycotted this game.
The Milwaukee Bucks sitting out Game 5 of their series against the Orlando Magic, the most drastic move yet in the NBA bubble to protest racial injustice. From the moment the Raptors pulled up in Orlando, they've tried to send a collective message condemning anti-black racism and police brutality. The kneeling, the banners, the slogans. But with another police shooting of another black man in the U.S., these star athletes are asking themselves some very tough questions.
We came here for a reason and you know, using our platform and wanting to send a message and hopefully bring awareness and bring a change. But I don't know, it just feels like we're stuck, you know. It feels like we're stuck. It feels like things are not changing. It feels like we're not doing anything, you know, productive, basically.
Norman Powell, and that should do it.
A growing sentiment fueling talk among players that playing this game at this time may not be worth it. Coach Nick Nurse says a player-led meeting was held last night about what more can be done.
And I think that's what I can sense from the discussion is their disappointments of, man, how can we get something to change, right? Like now we need something to change, not just attention on the problem. We need a plan of action. So I think that's about what I could share with you.
And while the team isn't confirming whether they'll boycott the first game of their playoff series against Boston tomorrow, Nurse says some players are considering whether to play at all.
Like I've had a couple really deep, heartfelt discussions with a few of these guys here this morning, you know, about playing, not playing, being in the bubble, leaving the bubble, coming to the bubble, or, you know, all these things. And I just give them my own personal opinions on it.
Pascal Siakam says he hasn't watched the video of the Jacob Blake shooting, refuses to, he says, because it hurts too much.
There's really a lot of, you know, things that are way bigger than basketball going on. Like, you want to be able to play, you want to be able to, you know, because at the end of the day, we know that basketball brings something to people. But at the same time, just seeing that happening every day, man, like it's tough. It's tough. It hurts. And yeah, it hurts.
Marivelle Tarouk, CBC News, Toronto.
In the wake of the Bucks boycott this afternoon, the NBA has postponed all of today's games, including 2 games that were supposed to be played tonight. A reminder, the Raptors are scheduled to play the Boston Celtics tomorrow evening. Lawyers for a Toronto police officer who beat Devontae Miller, a young black man, are asking for the conviction to be thrown out. Constable Michael Thoreau was found guilty of assault in late June, but he was found not guilty of aggravated assault or obstruction of justice in relation to the December 2016 incident involving Devontae Miller, which left him blind in one eye. Thoreau's lawyer says they have filed an application to vacate the verdict, arguing the conviction for assault was not available to the judge. In his ruling, the judge said he could not rule out the possibility that self-defense played a role in an early portion of the encounter, but he said the self-defense argument collapsed when Thoreau armed himself with a roughly meter-long pipe and hit Miller in the head as Miller was retreating. As a result, Thoreau was acquitted of aggravated assault but convicted of the lesser charge of assault. Police say this man posted a threat against an entire neighborhood on Instagram, calling for people to, quote, shoot everyone in Regent Park after the break, who he is and what residents of Regent Park have to say about the threat.
Just living in a marginalized area that may have gang activity in itself makes the non-gang members in that area vulnerable. So when something like this happens, it amplifies the threat by 1,000.
A woman is dead after a stabbing at a convenience store near Sherburne and Dundas. Police were called to the scene just after 10 this morning. The victim, believed to be in her 30s, was rushed to hospital where she was pronounced dead. The Toronto Police Homicide Squad is now taking over this case. No suspect information has been released. The mayor is asking for immediate action to improve safety near the Roehampton Hotel in Midtown. The hotel is being used as a temporary shelter. Now, some community members have reported an increase in break-ins, discarded needles, and other safety threats. A shelter client was also stabbed over the weekend. Mayor John Tory and Councillor Josh Matlow penned an open letter to the housing general manager asking for additional safety precautions to be put in place, things like an expedited school safety plan, expanded patrols of the area, addiction supports, and recreational programming for clients. Some residents of Regent Park are on edge tonight after police warning their neighborhood is under threat. A man from a rival downtown community posted death threats on his Instagram account, the post encouraging his followers to shoot area residents. Greg Ross explains.
Imagine threatening an entire community. I've never seen it before.
Constable David Hopkinson says this is a first in his 30-plus years on the force. Police say last week, 31-year-old Rowan Atkins put out a threat on his Instagram page asking his 3,000 followers to shoot everyone in Regent Park.
We are aware that there are certain gang members that follow that account.
While a threat to an entire community may be rare, using social media for gang-related activity is not.
I strongly suggest that they take these threats serious.
Marcel Wilson is a former gang member. Now he runs an organization called the One by One Movement, a community advocacy group. Wilson says he sees threats on social media almost daily.
Real people are dying over Instagram posts, Facebook posts, Snapchat posts.
He says they call it cyberbanging, and it's completely changed the way gangs interact. He says all it takes is a disparaging remark about another person, area, or gang on social media.
You have a platform now where somebody from way at the other end of the city who may never even have interacted with this opposite gang or person can now engage in fights online that turn into actual physical deaths, physical shootings.
He says his organization has been calling on social media companies to get involved and help prevent the violence.
I think that they should invest in programs that are community-based in preventing a lot of these issues from happening. Maybe
Atkins' post was brought to the attention of police by concerned residents of Regent Park, and until he is caught, there will be increased security in the area.
We've provided greater patrols and greater officer awareness in that community so that we can address, this threat that's being made.
Atkins is known to police, and he's considered violent and dangerous. Greg Ross, CBC News, Toronto.
When we come back, a new report is warning about the possible closure of dozens of radio stations in the next few months. What effect that could have on keeping a community's voice alive.
If the black community loses this frequency, the chance of them ever having a radio voice again in Canada is like next to none.
Starting school can be stressful at the best of times. A new grade, new friends, new teachers, new school. But this year, adding to that, going back during a global pandemic and fears of catching the virus. Nazima Walji explains.
Didn't get your bag. Nadia Kabir is still busy unpacking. She and her family moved to a new neighborhood and her kids will be going to a new school, even though she's nervous about what classes will look like when they resume.
Now this is a new norm, to be wearing the mask all the time and then washing hands more frequently than ever. So I'm not sure how they can cope up with this new norm.
Her son Nafur is going into grade 6. He says he feels more than just the regular first day jitters.
I'm worried because I'm starting in a new school with COVID-19 on top of that, which makes it hard to get to understand the school and to make friends.
With school boards across the province having different start dates and different requirements for who should and should not be wearing masks, that uncertainty creates a new layer of anxiety, says psychologist Todd Cunningham.
We've gone through, as a society, for the last 6 months, worrying about the safety of others, safety of our families, needing to do these physical distancings, and now we're going to change that. We're putting ourselves back into an environment where we are closer together.
He suggests parents set up routines.
So let's practice wearing the face mask and kind of work through some of the challenges of what do you do when it starts to feel itchy and sweaty.
Students aren't the only ones with back-to-school nerves. Teachers say playing and learning comes with a certain risk.
It's like a petri dish, a kindergarten room.
John Paul Kane is a Toronto kindergarten teacher. He is going back to work, but still doesn't know what it will look like.
I think we're going to have to split the class in half, so half will maybe go outside with Maureen, the other half will stay with me. Things will be contained in large Ziploc bags that have the child's name on it so that they can access those things. Everything that they touch has to be sanitized at the end of the day.
Kabir's daughter will be starting senior kindergarten at a school in Ajax. But there's still time for Kabir to get Zara prepared. Right now, she's excited to meet and make new friends. Nazima Walji, CBC News, Toronto.
So when exactly are classes starting? Do students have to wear masks? Will there be smaller class sizes? We have those answers for all English language GTA school boards online at cbc.ca/Toronto. Brampton's mayor says the city is making good progress in the fight against COVID-19 thanks to residents following the rules.
By and large, there is wide compliance. I just want to say how encouraging that is. When I go to a transit stop, when I go to any indoor settings, we're seeing broad compliance in our city, which highlights that everyone is taking the advice of public health seriously, and it's probably why we're making such progress in pushing back COVID-19.
As of today, there are 5 inpatients at Brampton Civic Hospital with no patients in the ICU. Peel's medical officer of health says, though, there's been a small increase in hospital admissions and COVID-19 cases have started to trend upwards in the past week. The mayor also announced today that the city will soon reopen its council chambers to the public. As of September 16th, a maximum of 50 people will be allowed to attend council meetings in person on a pre-booked basis. The city will continue to offer attendance options online. A report today from the Canadian Association of Broadcasters projects the possible closure of 50 radio stations within 4 to 6 months and a further 150 radio stations in the following 18 months. This comes as a petition is circulating to keep a Toronto radio station Black-owned. G98.7 broadcasts urban adult contemporary music. Now, the founder passed away last year, and as Talia Ricci reports, many say losing Black ownership would mean losing their voice.
When we don't control our own voice, a lot of times we're pushed out.
Aubrey Clark wants to keep G98.7 frequencies Black-owned for many reasons.
So the gateways continue to be there for other people to come into the market. To have another group buy the Black voice, that's what I consider 98.7 is the Black voice of Toronto, and then control it is systemic racism in itself.
Broadcaster Fitzroy Gordon, the founder of the Toronto-based radio station, passed away last year. Now, with the station's future ownership in question, Clark is trying to get people's attention through a petition.
And if the black community loses this frequency, the chance of them ever having a radio voice again in Canada is like next to none.
With G98, they have a very close relationship with the station.
Reggae artist Exco Levi stands behind this call. He says his songs frequently get airtime on the station.
This is our main platform, you know what I mean? Because as local artists that is not signed to major record labels, you know what I mean?
A platform not just for artists, but also for black business owners.
It's important to us for that reason. It's been our sole opportunity to communicate to our community, to talk to them the way we can, the cultural inflections, the way we speak. This is probably the only station we have the opportunity to do this with.
The petition says interested parties will have the chance to bid for ownership of the radio station. Mayor John Tory and Premier Doug Ford, among many other politicians, have expressed their support for keeping the station black-owned. Meanwhile, in a statement, the CRTC says this is a court-ordered receivership and sales process not involving the commission currently. Adding, should an application be received, we will take into consideration all of the concerns of interested parties in an open and transparent public process. Clark hopes to see the station's legacy continue.
Right? It's inspired us. It's also given our young folks, something to look up to say that, hey, maybe I can be on radio one day.
Talia Ricci, CBC News, Toronto.
It has been a very hot summer so far, Nick. Bit of a cool down right now, so is that it? Are we done?
Bit of an up and down is what it is, Dwight. We did have a cool down today. We've got a warm up tomorrow, and it's actually because of this, a warm front that's pushing through. Then we'll have a cool down into next week, so a roller coaster ride in our weather. Let's talk about it. So rain showers and thunderstorms moving across the region right now. It's just started across the Oakville-Burlington area. We're also seeing it up around Vaughan and Newmarket right now, part of a larger system. This line is going to push through, and there is the potential for some heavy rain in there. Still looking at severe thunderstorm watches in effect in areas around London, north and south, although I suspect those will be dropped shortly. And special weather statements as well for Newmarket, Innisfil, and areas further north for about 50 to 75 millimeters of rain with this system. Now, most of it is an overnight event. By tomorrow morning, generally pushes off to the east, and then we've got scattered showers and the risk of a thunderstorm tomorrow, especially to the southwest. And then as we head toward Friday, we've got another system that's making its way in, and that's going to bring with it another 15 to 25 millimeters of rain. Mostly, though, Friday night into Saturday, sort of the first half of Saturday. So Friday, generally speaking, is going to be dry until you get to the later part of the day. How much can we expect with this system? It really kind of depends where you are. Generally 15 to 25 millimeters of rain for Toronto, although I think around the Oakville-Burlington area and then up toward Newmarket, that's where we're going to see some of the heavier amounts. And like I said, we've got some special weather statements in effect. Now, we had talked about Hurricane Laura earlier. This is a look at it on the satellite and radar image. I mentioned that it's going to get swept up in the easterly flow. And you notice as it moves up toward Arkansas, it pushes eastward. So it's not really going to affect our weather, other than it might inject a little bit of moisture for Friday and into Saturday, but we're not going to see most of the effects of this. There's a look at tonight as we move through the next few days. Temperatures at 29 tomorrow, humidex closer to 37. Friday starts out dry, increase in rainfall, and then cooler as we head towards Sunday, but Sunday the better of the days for the weekend. Dwight.
Thanks, Nick.
You bet.
A Canadian soldier with extremist ties is the focus of a new military investigation. Officials want to determine how he was allowed to continue serving despite openly supporting a far-right group and posting anti-government rhetoric online. CBC's Murray Brewster has more.
This message is brought to you by the 3%ers of Tennessee.
It started in the States and migrated north. 3%ers are survivalists and gun rights advocates. The Soldiers of Odin are a separate, anti-immigration, white supremacist group started in Finland with chapters in Canada that have tried to present a softer face. and supporters of both groups have been discovered in a Canadian Ranger unit. CBC News began investigating the 4th Ranger Group after a member from Manitoba was arrested in connection with the storming of Rideau Hall last month and threats made against the Prime Minister. The investigation led us to Eric Migland and his former wife Jody, also a Ranger. Both supported the 3% movement. 4 years ago, military counterintelligence became aware of Eric Migland's online posts and interviewed him as a possible threat. His social media feed is full of anti-government rhetoric. One post calls the Prime Minister a treasonous bastard, and yet, as of last week, although not on active duty, he was still in the Rangers, to the shock and dismay of the Defence Minister.
My viewpoints have been very clear at this. Any type of behavior like this is unacceptable.
CBC News contacted Eric Migland, who initially agreed to comment. He has since gone silent. His ex-wife, in an email, says the couple are no longer 3%ers. Jody Migland said new members of the group have racist and anti-government leanings, and they wanted no part of it. Yet, Eric Migland, as late as June this year, was still tweeting support for 3%ers. One expert believes the military tried to rehabilitate him, but failed.
The fact that he was not also discharged or asked to leave outright is really surprising.
The military has launched an investigation into what CBC News has uncovered. Aside from being unable to explain why Eric Migland was allowed to stay, it is also unclear why the leadership of the Ranger unit didn't take action when his activities became apparent. Murray Brewster, CBC News, Ottawa.
The presidential election process in the U.S. is picking up speed. The Republican National Convention carries on. The Democrats have their candidate in place, and Americans living here in Canada are trying to get their ballots in the mail well ahead of voting day. Jamie Strachan has more on the organizations that are getting Americans abroad on board for this election.
You know, turnout is the key in elections that are going to be close, and I think this one will be.
At an unprecedented time in U.S. history, longtime Democratic organizer Tim Ellis says the old election cliche that every vote counts has never been more true. That includes eligible American voters living in Canada.
We also know there's somewhere between 650,000 and 1 million Americans living in Canada. That's a big number of voters, potential voters. We know that we can be the margin of difference in a lot of different elections in America.
Ellis is helping with Democrats abroad in Canada's Get Out the Vote effort. With COVID, nearly all outreach is digital.
The cornerstone of our efforts is getting people to go to votefromabroad.org.
The nonpartisan website explains exactly what voters need to do to request a ballot and cast their vote.
It can get quite complicated. There's 50 states, there's 7 territories. All of them have their own rules for voting.
Visit FVAP.
Not just political parties are involved in getting out the vote. The Toronto Raptors are imploring Americans living in Canada to cast their ballot.
I'm more than happy to try to push to help people realize that it is very simple to do it. And then when it comes time to do it,
I was just saying how I was missing going to the convention.
The efforts of Republicans living in Canada isn't quite as sophisticated as the Democrats, but longtime organizer Mark Feigenbaum says voters are motivated.
I would say this election more so than the last ones in my lifetime. People are very excited about voting. I don't think there's going to be a lot to stir people up to get to vote.
Americans living in Canada, like many voters south of the border, will of course be casting their ballots by mail at a time when mail-in voting and the U.S. Postal Service itself are election issues.
We're not going to go to voting by mail. Voting by mail is wrought with fraud and abuse.
To slow down the mail at any time is disgraceful. To slow it down at COVID is despicable.
In a tight election, voters abroad are being encouraged to request ballots now, so their votes will count on Election Day. Jamie Strachan, CBC News, Toronto.
I'm Ismail Alpha, host of Metro Morning. On tomorrow's program, the Toronto Raptors have been leading the NBA. They're also leading the league's conversation around Black Lives Matter. Now, they swept the Nets in round 1 of the playoffs, and next they take on the Celtics. We'll take you to Boston to set up the series and the mood of players after another black man in America was shot by police. Join me weekdays from 5:30 to 8:30 on CBC Radio 1.
How do you get your young child to wear a face mask and actually keep it on? It's something parents of children in lower grades may be trying to figure out as they get their kids ready for the classroom. And tonight, we bring you the creative way one Toronto mom got her daughter familiar with mask wearing.
What is that?
A mask.
And you have a matching one too? I first made the set, so I made the matching set for her. So I have the same mask, she has a mask, and Stephanie, her favorite doll, has the matching mask. As things started to open up and as we started to go out more and adventure more and explore more, school started to come on the horizon. It was really clear that I needed to do something to help normalize masks for Adeline. And I do size them down depending on the doll. So if somebody says they have a much smaller, we started telling her that, there is a cold and there's a virus that right now it's really easy to catch. So we have to be really careful, and it means that we have to keep our hands really clean, and it means that we're going to change the way that we do some things. And she's been fairly understanding. Well, they're their comfort, right? Especially now when kids aren't seeing their friends. They're not having the same kind of social interaction. I mean, I don't think that it matters how old you are. Everybody loves the feeling of hugging a stuffy, right? There's just something, I think, inherently comfortable that comes along with it, even more so for kids, and even more so now when things are so uncertain. So, it's really just me going on my gut and just seeing how my own daughter reacts to them and how much she loves her own stuffies and how they are her friends and they're part of her world. And, we go for walks and she decides who's going to come with us that day. This has been really great. Parents really like it. They say that their kids love them. They say that it makes sense. It helps their kids feel connected, both to the Dolly and Me and the Teddy and Me masks, as well as just the kids' masks as well. So response so far has been positive.
Is it just me, or did Mom have some really cool tats in that segment? Rain and more rain and a little thunder and lightning. Maybe Nick is back after the break with a final look at our forecast. Stay with us. We will be right back. So, Nick, we are all on this roller coaster together. Which direction are we heading, sir?
Yeah, I guess it depends what hour of the day it is. Keeps going up and down. We talked about the cooler weather. It was 20 degrees today. That's kind of where we've sat for most of the day. The evening and the overnight are going to be pretty mild. Tomorrow's going to be hot and humid, and then it drops off again toward the end of the weekend. Right now, what we're looking at is the warm front just approaching. So we've had rain that has started across the Burlington-Oakville area within the last hour to hour and a half or so. Rain showers have pushed eastward across most of the city, but heavier rain is to come. There's actually quite a bit of rainfall in this, and I think there's two areas that are going to be sort of heaviest hit with the rain. One is up around the Newmarket area and areas further north and then east, but also it looks like we're expecting to see some fairly heavy rainfall down around the Burlington-Oakville area, maybe touching about Mississauga. So those are kind of the heaviest areas of rainfall. There's a look at the forecast through the next 24. So a bit of a thundery night tonight. Rain showers generally tapering off for tomorrow, then scattered showers and thunderstorms tomorrow afternoon. But 29 degrees, humidex of 37. It feels like we were just there the other day, which we were.
Yes,
but we're on a roller coaster.
Thank you, Nick.
You bet.
That is our show for tonight. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you back here tomorrow at 6. The Late Show is preempted for hockey. We're also keeping an eye on the NBA and those boycotts. Have a great night, everybody. We'll see you back here tomorrow.